Okay, mashallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. MashaAllah, the topic today is actually a difficult topic. It involves, it's to do with innovations or bid'ah in Islam. And right from the outset, I'll let you know that my personal opinion is that this is actually, from a scholastic, textual point of view, one of the most intricate topics in Islam. But it has become the one which has become the most oversimplified in the minds of many of the lay people. This topic is something which is important because, on the one hand, for example, the Prophet ﷺ, and many of you would know this hadith or would have heard this hadith plenty of times. Quite often, when the Prophet ﷺ would start a nikah, or he'd give a Friday sermon, or maybe even a general exhortation, quite often he would say that فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الْكَلَامِ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ or فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الْحَدِيثِ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ وَخَيْرَ الْحَدِي حَدِي مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم وَشَرُّ الْأُمُورِ مُحْدَثَاتُهَا وَكُلَّ مُحْدَثَةٍ بِدْعَةٍ وَكُلَّ بِدْعَةٍ دَلَالَةٍ وَكُلَّ دَلَالَةٍ فِي النَّارِ. That indeed the best speech is the Book of Allah, and the best guidance is the guidance and example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the worst thing in religion are the newly invented matters. For every newly invented matter is an innovation. Every innovation is misguidance, and all that misguides to the fire. And the reason why innovation, or bid'ah, to use the Arabic and Islamic term, the reason why bid'ah or innovation is so severely condemned in Islam is because in the end, we know that the Prophet ﷺ and his teachings and the Quran is the final revelation of Allah, the final heavenly guidance sent by Allah to humanity. And the Prophet ﷺ is the final prophet and messenger. There will be no prophet to come after him. And therefore, whatever the Prophet ﷺ has brought of guidance, of hidayah, it needs to be kept intact. It needs to be kept as pure as possible. And innovations or bid'ah, what it is actually adding to the revelation and mixing revelation up with impure things, wrong things, and false things. That's in a nutshell. This isn't a scholarly definition. This is just a brief explanation or rule of thumb. And so the Prophet ﷺ also knows that previous prophets, their message and their teachings ended up being forgotten or lost, or in some cases corrupted. That some of the guidance was kept, but it was mixed with other ideas and other philosophies, and in the end, that pure light that came from heaven in terms of guidance that Allah gave particular prophets, that light, pure light, source of light, was mixed with darknesses. And in the end, when you mix light with darkness, if the darkness is mixed a lot, then the light gets really blotted out. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in his wisdom, decided that there will be one more niche of light, one more lamp, a light-giving lamp, that will be for humanity. And embedded in that final light, called the Quran, is a strict teaching that وَإِيَّاكُمْ وَمُحْدَثَاتِ الْأُمُورِ, beware of newly invented matters. Because every newly invented matter is a bid'ah, is an innovation, and all that is misguidance, and all that misguides to the fire. So that's why the topic is important. And that's why innovations in Islam are severely condemned. The flip side of that is actually لا وصول إلى السعادة إلا بالعلم والعبادة, as Imam al-Ghazali says, rahmatullahi alayhi. There is no true No gaining true delight and happiness except through knowledge and worship. Or in another way of looking at it, our ittiba, our following the revelation, is the command that Allah gives us. Ittabi'u ma unzila ilaykum min rabbikum. Follow what has been revealed to you from your Lord. Okay? Follow. And this word ittiba, following the guidance, is in one sense opposite to bid'ah, innovation, which is mixing guidance up with newly invented ideas and philosophies which are actually not part of the original guidance. And so in the end, that's how we're going to be judged, upon ittiba. Did I follow? Not did I know. Did I follow the guidance that Allah sent? So the guidance really is knowledge and practice. Knowledge, practice. We can't practice without knowledge. But knowledge without practice is also useless. Okay, it's not only useless, it's sinful. And of course, looking at the greater picture, we learn knowledge, we know, and then we practice, we act on that knowledge. And when we act on that knowledge, we truly, slowly and steadily, we truly know. We know first, and then we do the act upon that knowledge, and this knowledge and action leads to true deep knowledge. And that's what we're aiming for. That it's all about truly knowing Allah and knowing how I should behave with Allah in terms of submission, humility, reverence, ibadah. Okay? So that's the context. As I said, the difficulty is it's a matter which today, and most people don't do it intentionally, it's just that for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and actually I would probably count myself as one of those main people, at least in the UK, who about 20, 25 years ago, about 25, 26 years ago, used to understand this topic of bid'ah, innovations, in one particular way. Okay, but as you learn more and more, and it's not what I learned was wrong as such, at least not on this issue. It was that what I didn't realize is actually there is another whole different scholarly way of looking at the issue. But I was fixated on one scholarly way of looking at it, and I believe that it was the only way of looking at it. Once you believe that your view, or the view of your sheikh, or the view of your group, or the view of your party, is the only way of looking at something, you're very likely to cause schisms in the ummah, even if you yourself are doing something which is generally right. And so we need to be aware of this. And this is one of the clear topics in which it causes a schism. There will be people who won't pray in certain mosques because, oh, they do bid'ah. There are people who won't, who will avoid certain Quran reciters in Ramadan because they do bid'ah. There are people who will avoid certain speakers and scholars because they do bid'ah. There are people who say, oh, don't read certain books because that's all bid'ah. And that's a good attitude to have. I don't want to be involved in something which is polluting the pure light of revelation. Absolutely not. But is that truly the case, that that person is upon some evil innovation or form of misguidance? Because if I believe someone is, then it's very likely I'm going to have good brotherhood with them. Maybe I won't even salam them. Maybe I won't even make dua for them. So actually having misunderstanding on this issue is one of the main reasons, one of the 4 or 5 main reasons why Muslims have the schisms and disunity that they do. And when I say Muslims, I talk about more religiously conscious, practicing Muslims have the schisms they do. Okay, so without being a test, to give points, whatever, who could tell me a definition of what is a bid'ah? When the Prophet ﷺ says, beware of innovations. When the Prophet ﷺ says something like, Man amila amalan laysa alayhi amruna fahuwa rad. Hadith in Sahih Muslim. Whoever does an action that we have not commanded, that action will be rejected. And when he says here in the hadith in Abu Dawud, alaykum bi sunnati وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ الْمَهْدِيِّينَ مِنْ بَعْدِي. Cling to my sunnah and that of the rightly guided caliphs. Cling to it tightly. وَإِيَّاكُمْ وَمُحْدَثَاتِ الْأُمُورِ. And beware of newly invented matters. فَإِنَّ كُلَّ مُحْدَثَةٍ بِدْعَةٍ. Because all newly invented matters is an innovation. What is the word in? What is the definition of innovation? Anybody hazard a guess?
Something new.
Okay, something new in the religion. Or do you say something new in the religion? Okay, something new in the religion.
For sawab.
Something new in the religion which is done for thawab, for gaining the reward of Allah. Okay, that's pretty good.
Anything other than sunnah?
MashaAllah, anything other than sunnah will be a bid'ah. That's true. All of what you said is true. You've come at it from different ways. You said that it's anything new in religion. And the Shaykh has added here that if it is done intending to worship Allah, draw close to Him, earn reward, thawab. And then you've just come from a totally different angle. You've just taken the word sunnah, which is guidance, okay, the prophetic guidance. Anything that goes against it must be misguidance. So anything that goes against the sunnah, absolutely. And the Prophet ﷺ indicates this by saying, alaykum bi sunnati, and then later he says, cling to my sunnah, beware of innovations. As if they were two, and they are two opposite paths. But what is a scholarly definition? Those are not definitions as much as indications of what may be a sunnah. But what is a scholarly definition?
I would suggest that anything you do according to your own desire, without which has no root in Islam.
Okay, mashallah. So we have a few key words there. Anything that is done, okay, part of the to make it part of the religion, but it doesn't have any roots or basis in the religious teachings. Okay, you didn't quite say it like that, but I've kind of highlighted key things. MashaAllah, that's good as well. I was brought up, and it's a very popular concept, what I'm going to say here, to believe that a bid'ah is anything that the Prophet ﷺ didn't do. And then a few years later, I was taught to refine that a little. A bid'ah, innovation, is anything that the Prophet ﷺ and the companions didn't do. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, alaykum bi sunnati wa sunnati al-khulafa'i rashidin al-mahdiin. Cling to my guidance, my sunnah, and the sunnah of the rightly guided caliphs. Meaning the Sahaba as a whole. But as days went by, as years went by, I realized that, subhanAllah, I'm kind of going against my own kind of rule. And this rule that I told you, this definition, that bid'ah is everything other than what the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba done. If the Prophet ﷺ and the companions didn't do something in Islam, then it's bid'ah. If the Prophet ﷺ and the companions didn't do something in Islam, then it must be a bid'ah. Now that definition, if the Prophet ﷺ didn't do it, nor his companions, then it's a bid'ah. I will suggest to you that actually it's not a definition, but it's another good indication that it probably is misguidance. It probably is, not that it is. Why? Because, for example, which is my view even today, the minority scholarly view is that the Jum'ah khutbah, if it addresses an audience which are mostly non-Arabs, then the Jum'ah khutbah, providing it contains some key element of Arabic words, like praising Allah in Arabic, like sending salat upon the Prophet in Arabic, like making the shahada in Arabic, like reciting a verse of the Quran in Arabic, like instructing people to fear God, ittaqullah ya ayyuhal muslimun, or something like that in Arabic, then everything after that can be in the local language, since one of the goals of the khutbah, okay, according to a vast majority of scholars, is reminder and admonition. And you can't remind and admonish if the people don't understand what you're saying, because you're speaking in a different language. But did the Prophet ﷺ or his companions ever do a khutbah in Persian or Greek or Syriac or other than Arabic? Absolutely not. Did the companions, when they spread out to almost to the four corners of the world, did they ever do a khutbah in the language of the majority of people? Absolutely not. Did the next generation, the third and fourth generation of Muslims, when they came to the lands of India, when they came to the lands of China, when they came to the lands of West Africa, okay, all of which are non-Arabic speaking, were non-Arabic speaking lands. Most of them are still non-Arabic in one sense. Did they ever do a bit of Arabic and then the local West African dialect khutbah? Absolutely not. They just stuck to their guns and did an Arabic khutbah. Okay?
How did the people could understand them?
Many people didn't understand them. But what happens is when Islam comes as a force, it begins to root Arabic language into the culture. So when Islam conquered Egypt, Egypt moves to be an Arabic-speaking country. West Africa, what we now will call Libya, Tunisia, Morocco, Mauritania, they become Arabic-speaking countries. The only significant place where that fails is the Indian subcontinent. I mean, there's more than one place, but that's a significant place because of the number of people. It actually fails. And there are a number of reasons why it fails and becomes very problematic. Otherwise, a lot of places where Islam went, over 200, 300, 400, 500 years, Arabic becomes ingrained in the culture. And so it was almost like a bit of foresight that, you know what, we'll just stick to Arabic. You may not get it in the khutbah, but you can always learn religion outside of the khutbah. And you'll be so keen to pick up a few words anyway. Sooner or later, you'll be part of the language. The language of any nation has a lot of effect on the attitudes and the conduct of the people.
But is it part of the worship?
Absolutely. If you take one scholarly opinion just as a simple one, the two khutbahs actually replace the 2 rakahs of dhuhr. There's 4 rakahs of dhuhr, okay? But come Friday, we have 2 rakah of Jummah, and some scholars say that 2 khutbahs that we have stand in for the other 2 rakahs of dhuhr. But from whatever angle you look at it, it is an ibadah, it is a worship. It's a worship, it has a particular form, it has a particular sunnahs, it has particular conditions, particular recommendations. So it actually is. It's not a customary thing. So anyway, I remember keeping that in the back of my mind. The sheikhs that I learn from, the scholars that I'm learning from, most of them said that you can do a khutbah in English, which is why I've been doing khutbahs, for about 18, 20 years in Arabic English. And yet these were the same sheikhs who were telling me, but anything that the Prophet and the companions didn't do is a bid'ah. But sometimes when you get into learning Islam from a particular teacher or set of teachers or a particular school, you tend to think, oh, that the truth is all here. There's nothing outside, there's no truth outside of it. Especially when you're young, you can be very bigoted. Even if your character is good, you can be very bigoted. And sometimes in religious people, for example, someone like me who was brought up here, when I was young, back in the 70s, I was just telling someone, I used to go down to Upton Park and I used to support West Ham. I wasn't a very hard supporter, but I went to the matches. There were people of my generation who were very strong on supporting a particular team. And if you wore the wrong coloured shirts, okay, you could, subhanAllah, there were many times that I had have to run to the local district line station just to get away from people, okay? Especially because I lived in Leighton and everyone supported Orient. My friends supported Leighton Orient at that time. And one of the things that we didn't realise when we were young is, I used to look at the elders, and some of them used to be very nationalistic. I'm Pakistani, I'm Bengali, I'm Indian, Gujarati, okay? And sometimes, subhanAllah, this is a true story, I was in Preston studying back in the early 80s. And I used to go to this local masjid near the university. And, mashallah, really nice masjid. And I used to see this elderly man, like an uncle. And he always used to be in the front row. And he always used to be smiling. He was one of the few people who would salam with a smile. Otherwise, most of the elders would salam, subhanAllah, without the smile. But mashallah. And he would sometimes ask me how I am. When he got to find out I'm from London and I'm here to study, he would now and again ask me, oh, do you have food to eat? Because, I heard students don't do well, but we studied in the year of Maggie Thatcher, so we had a big grant, okay? We had, subhanAllah. Anyway, Within the year, what happened was, it was a masjid which is predominantly Gujarati. That end of Preston at that time was predominantly Gujarati, Indian Gujarati. And they were divided into the Baroda, Boruchi, and all these places, Surat, or wherever they come from, kind of people. Anyway, I walked into the masjid one day, 6 months down in that year, and one of the committee members came up to me and said, we've got a vacancy on the committee. Someone's left the area, and so would you like to be on the committee? I said, no, not really. I'm a student, what do I know about mosques or whatever? I said, no, not really. They said, but we see you coming regularly and whatever. It'd be a good time. I said, no, I couldn't really do it because studying. And I said, but there's that uncle, and I pointed over there, or over there, wherever I pointed. And he looked back and he said, yeah, we know him. I said, this man, he looks really, really good. He goes, yeah. And then this is how the brother, he's standing in front of me. So he leans into me and goes, but the only thing is he's Pakistani. So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, okay, so there's going to be more. Like he's Pakistani and he robs banks. Right, so that's, But no, there's nothing like, there's no ending to this. It's just, the end is, the full stop is after Pakistani. He's Pakistani. So when I got that, I got it then. I said, yeah, but he seems to be a righteous person, Allah knows best. And he's local, he's regular at the prayer, and the young youths like myself, and kind of we get on with him. So he'd be a really good person for various reasons. He goes, no, but in our constitution, it says you have to be Gujarati. Not only Gujarati, you have to be Gujarati, and you have to be from this place of Gujarat. Okay, where are Gujarati? Good. I said, subhanAllah, you've got yourself a problem then, because, this is the same kind of nationalism that is destroying various places. Okay, and you bring it into mosque. So I grew up with this kind of thing that avoid nationalism and group mentality. And you're Urdu speaking, and you look down upon Punjabi speaking, and Punjabi speaking, all that kind of thing. And if you're Bengali, you've got no chance. Right, okay? And you realize that when you become Muslim, you realize, when you start reading the Quran, you realize that this is not the way the Prophet ﷺ taught Muslims to be. But what we didn't realize is that as I'm fleeing from that type of groupie mentality, you get into other group mentalities. But now it's Islamic groups. Okay? So if you follow my sheikh, I might even give you 10% of my books. If you don't follow my sheikh, okay, you're okay, brother, but you might be a little bit misguided. Many of us, actually, if we look into ourselves, I am sure, not because I want to hang out the dirty linen of the ummah, but I'm sure many of us have bigoted attitudes, even if they're kind of mild. Why? Because it's the nafs, the ego. If it's not going to be bigoted about this, it'll be bigoted. If it's not bigoted about your nasab, that I'm Jat, or I'm, whatever, I'm a Sayyid. Sayyid is something to be happy about, but Jat is what, so what? Jat or But, it doesn't matter, really, it doesn't matter. Okay, because Allah doesn't judge us on names, He judges us on beliefs and actions. Okay, but some people are really proud of this, that I belong to this and I belong to that. Okay, if it's not that, then it's the color of your skin. If it's not that, the language you speak. If it's not that, the area that you're born. If it's not that, then something. Man will invent something to be bigoted to. Okay, so going back to this bid'ah, I realized that, subhanAllah, I need to look into this. And as my Arabic was getting better, and as I was able to read more Arabic books and then speak to my scholars and question them, but if you say this, then what about that? Anyway, I came to this realization that actually bid'ah is a very complicated subject. So what I'm going to do very, very quickly is I'm going to give you what I believe to be the best and most cautious path to follow to do with innovations. But it's not the only word on the subject, and nor is it the final word on the subject. It's not the only word on the subject, and it's not the final word. Because it's not that the Quran doesn't come down with guidance on this issue. It's a big issue, so it comes down with quite a lot of guidance. It's that some things that the Prophet ﷺ said, and some things that the companions did, it kind of can make you scratch your head and think, so do we look at it this way? Or do we look at it that way? Do we look at it this way? Or do we look at it that way? And some things that the great Imams who learned directly from them. I mean, if you just take Abu Hanifa, rahmatullah alayhi, let's just put it in context. Because 2-3 weeks ago we had a little talk on schools and whatever. Abu Hanifa, he is born in the year 80 Hijrah. 80 Hijri. Okay? Ali radiallahu anhu passes away roughly around about 36, 37 Hijri, round about that time. So between Ali radiallahu anhu and Abu Hanifa's birth, okay, there's about 47, 48 years. 47, 48 years. That's almost the gap between my son, Abdurrahman, and my father, roughly, just say. Okay. Although Abu Hanifa didn't meet Ali radiallahu anhu, but he saw at least one or two Sahaba, which makes him, Abu Hanifa, a tabi'i, a second generation Muslim. Then Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, when he goes on his quest to study, he's studying with some of the scholars of the second generation of Muslims, the tabi'un. He's studying with some of the senior ones who actually heard knowledge from the Sahaba directly. So this man is not only pious, Abu Hanifa, not only godly, but he's dhaki. He is highly intelligent. Imam Malik says, I know a man who, if he told you, and he's in the Prophet's mosque saying this, if he told you this pillar was made of gold, he would be able to convince you. Those rare times when Abu Hanifa would come down to Medina on a kind of ziyarah, Malik radiallahu anhu would make him sit Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi on his right hand side and look up to him. Because really, as Imam Shafi says, all of the jurists, all of the fuqaha are children in the laps of Abu Hanifa. Okay. Now, the reason why I mention this is because the Imams, because you might think, oh, well, what's the Imams got to do with anything? They've got everything, because in the end, we know what the Prophet did, alayhi salam, or taught us. And we try to understand some of the things he said via mediums, because we weren't there. And we have it from one generation teaching the next, who taught the next, who taught the next, who taught the next. Hopefully through an unbroken chain. Hopefully through an unbroken chain. And if someone comes to you and says, we don't need Imams, then already you know, whether he knows it or not, he is on misguidance. He is on misguidance. If he thinks the book of Allah, just by opening the Quran or having a collection of hadiths, is sufficient, he is more than misguided. He's, as the Arabs used to say, he's more misguided than his donkey. But not just misguided, he is dangerous, even if he doesn't know it yet. Because he will quite happily interpret Islam and come out with new rulings which could destroy so much. And the reason why the Imams are there is because they help us get back to understanding what the Prophet ﷺ said. So here's what I'm going to teach about bid'ah. Anything that the Prophet ﷺ and the companions and the early Imams in the first 3 or 4 generations did not do as regards to religious practice, avoid. Let me repeat that again. Anything that he ﷺ didn't do, and nor the companions did, neither did the companions, and neither did the early Imams, say within the first 300-400 generations, first 200-300 years, avoid it. Why? Because it more likely is a bid'ah. It more likely is an innovation, which is misguidance, and misguidance is in the fire. But the reason why, so that's what I'm going to teach today. Okay? But the reason why, the last point, why I'm teaching it so simply like this is because, look, someone will say, well, the Prophet said, well, kullu muhdathatin bid'ah. Every innovation is misguidance. Well, is sitting on a chair in innovation? You say no, because it's nothing to do with religion. Ah, so you restricted the word kullu, every, to mean everything to do with religion. But the Prophet didn't say everything to do with religion. He just said, kullu muhdathatin bid'ah. Every newly invented matter is an innovation. But of course, the correct understanding of those words is everything in religion that doesn't have a basis is misguidance. So we've already interpreted the clear words of the Prophet by saying that actually he doesn't mean using light bulbs or a TV or a refrigerator or the internet. Those things have nothing to do with religious innovations. Okay, So I suggest to you, many scholars go even further than that. They say, yes, the word kullu muhdathatin bid'ah, every innovation is misguidance. It doesn't mean everything. And we agree, it doesn't mean everything. It means everything to do with the religion which doesn't have a basis in the religion. So using worldly things is not forbidden as such. But they also say, by turning to the Quran, well actually the word kullu in the Arabic language doesn't always mean everything anyway. So for example, they will say, when the Prophet ﷺ said every innovation is misguidance, and we understand to be every innovation to do with the religion is misguidance, he didn't even mean every innovation there. He meant most, or a good portion of. Because the Arabic word kullu, as occurs in the Quran, well, let's read this verse. Do you want to read the two verses? 44 on that one, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فلما نسوا ما ذكروا به فتحنا عليهم أبواب كل شيء.
So فتحنا
عليهم أبواب. So فلما نسوا ما ذكروا به فتحنا عليهم أبواب كل شيء.
So we opened up to them the gates of all things. This is actually talking about a group of people to whom a prophet was sent, and as a people they were very worldly civilized and sophisticated, with their buildings and all this, that and the other. Okay? And Allah blessed them in the sense that He, just like, Western civilization, which is, many of whom are atheists, okay, or whatever, but they're certainly not Muslim, but they are so blessed in the worldly sense, without a doubt. So there were nations like that. And Allah says we opened up to them the gates of everything. But it wasn't everything, because He didn't open up to them the gates of guidance. They were misguided, they were unbelievers. So when Allah says everything, He doesn't mean everything. He means a lot of things, but not everything. The word in the Quran, kullu, doesn't mean everything. It means some things. Another one, another example of how the Quran uses kullu. Destroying all things by the command of your Lord. Okay? So Allah visited this rebellious people with a severe punishment from heaven, and destroying everything by the command of Allah. But it actually didn't destroy everything, because some of the buildings and the dwellings and the mountains, they stayed. So some scholars say, look, actually when we look back at the life of the Sahaba and the second generation of Muslims and the third, we actually see them inventing some things in religion. And this is an important thing. Remember, I've already taught you one thing. Okay, so if you don't know better, you can follow it. If you have another view, Bismillah, you can follow your view. But the Sahaba, for example, and I'm going to run through them very quickly, okay? In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, hadith is in Bukhari, Prophet ﷺ was leading Maghrib prayer, and he says, Sami Allahu liman hamida. Someone just says, Rabbana lakal hamdu hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fi. At the end of the prayer, the Prophet ﷺ turns around and says, oh, who amongst you said that? Because I saw the angels vying with each other to write it down because of its greatness. But this person who said, the Prophet ﷺ taught Rabbana lakal hamd. But this Sahabi went extra. They went the extra mile. Well, if I'm going to praise Allah, I'm going to do it big time. Rabbana lakal hamdu hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarak. But he ﷺ never taught him that. The Prophet ﷺ didn't teach the companion that. So the companion added something in the prayer. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't turn around and say, it's a bid'ah. Why? We'll come back to why. Another example is, the Prophet ﷺ says in Hadith in Bukhari again, he says, Ya Bilal, what do you do that is so special that when I was in paradise, okay, did he see or did he hear the feet? He heard the footsteps, okay? Meaning that, Bilal has a place in paradise and a station. What do you do to deserve this? He goes, Ya Rasulullah, I don't do anything out of the ordinary that other people don't do, except that whenever I give the adhan, after I give the adhan, I pray 2 rak'ah, and whenever I make ablution, wudu, after wudu, I pray 2 rak'ah. The Prophet said, this is it. He didn't teach Bilal 2 rak'ah after adhan or 2 rak'ah after ablution. And neither did he say, that's a bid'ah, you've innovated something that I haven't taught. Why didn't he say it was an innovation? Because clearly he did add. Why isn't it innovation? Another example. One of the Sahaba, I can't remember who it is, but it's in his biography in the Isti'ab. One of the companions says to the wife of another companion, one of the main reasons I married you, other than the fact that, you're a good lady to marry, is that previously you were married to such and such a Sahabi, who we heard would be going to paradise or something like this. And I wanted to know what kind of things he does. And the wife says, my former husband, never did he come into the house, except that he prayed 2 rak'ah. And never did he, whenever he'd come back from outside, he'd pray 2 rak'ah. Prophet ﷺ didn't teach this. To do something so consistently, and he never left it. Then that famous one, which is also in Sahih Bukhari, where one of the companions is just about to be killed, and he says, hold on a minute. Have you got one last wish? Yes, I have. What is it? I want to pray. So he makes wudu really nicely, and he makes 2 rak'ah, and then they execute him. And then that kind of becomes a pattern that other people follow. Prophet ﷺ didn't say, oh, we didn't teach you this. It's a bid'ah. He didn't say that. Why? Then, for example, Umar radiallahu anhu, he fasts, not Sawm al-Wisal, but Sawm al-Dahr. The Prophet fasts without actually breaking his fast, without actually eating. And they asked him, you told us not to do this, but you do it yourself. But I am fed from places you don't know. Okay, so put that aside. That's Wisal fasting. But Dahr fasting, Sawm al-Dahr, is fasting every day, apart from the days of Eid and days of Tashriq that you're not allowed to fast. Otherwise, fasting 360 odd days of the year. This was the habit of Umar radiallahu anhu and his son Ibn Umar and the lady Aisha radiallahu anha. It became the practice in later days of Abu Hanifa and a group of the early Muslim religious authorities of Salaf. And yet the Prophet didn't teach that. In fact, if I were to relate to you the main additions that the Sahaba and the Tabi'un and the Imams did, we would be here until Fajr. There are so many of them. There are so many additions that actually it would go into the hundreds. And yet, no Imam turned around to the other Imam, and no Sahabi turned around to the other Sahabi, and nor did the Prophet turn around and say, oh, that's a bid'ah. You just added to what I didn't teach. Why? Because actually the best scholarly definition of bid'ah, which nearly every scholar agrees upon, but they differ on how to act upon it, is this. A bid'ah is that which has la asl lahu fi sharia. A bid'ah, innovation, is that which does not have a basis in the sharia. And what is the basis of the sharia? What forms the basis of our religious law and teachings? What are the sources which form the basics of our religious teaching? Anybody? The Quran and Hadith or Sunnah. Anything else? Ijma, not just Ijma Sahaba, not Ijma Sahaba, Ijma. Okay? Even though Ijma Sahaba is easier to ascertain, but we say Ijma. Consensus of the Muslim scholars. The Prophet said, La yajtami'um ummati ala dalala. My nation, meaning the scholars of my nation, won't unite upon error or misguidance. Meaning when they do unite, have ijma, unanimous agreement, it is guidance, we have to follow that. For example, there is an ijma. Al-jihad mawkulun ila al-imam wa ijtihadi. There's an ijma on this. That the affairs of war and peace, jihad, go back down to the head of state. The caliph, the sultan, the king, the amir, the president, the prime minister, whatever title he or she has. Al-jihad mawkulun ila al-imam wa ijtihadi. It's not the job of a scholar, though the scholar might advise the government. It's not the job of a soldier, though the general will advise. It's not the job of the businessman. It's the imam himself, the head of state. So anybody who calls for jihad today, and he is not a head of state leading a country, it's not jihad. It's not jihad. Period. So you don't even have to get into intentions, this, and it's not jihad. And you can't have making jihad by sitting in some cave somewhere and you're not a president of any land. Okay? That's not jihad. And there's an ijma on this. Not after 9/11. There's an ijma' from the earliest days of Islam. I learned this thing in 1992. 1992, people wouldn't have even imagined that some Muslims could do atrocious, murderous acts, as some have done. That's an example of an ijma'. That's 3. Okay, let me give you an example. Let me ask you a question. A man comes into the masjid, a brother, Muslim brother. He's waiting for the prayer and thinks, oh, brothers are drinking tea there and things like that. I'll just go take out a bit of cannabis, a bit of crack cocaine, do a bit of sniffing or whatever. Would that be okay? To take some drugs?
No.
Why not? Why is it haram?
A harmful item.
Well, you eat quite a few McDonald's beef burgers, and if you do your chicken and chips, that's going to be harmful, but in a different way.
Judgment. It gives you nasha.
All right, okay, gives you nasha. Okay, well, first and foremost, does the Quran or the Hadith say anything about cannabis or cocaine?
I think addiction.
Okay, but does it say about, listen to my question, does it say something specific about cocaine or cannabis? No. Right, so just as the respected brother there said, and it reiterated again, it's haram because it intoxicates. Okay? And therefore it falls under the rubric of khamr, of an intoxicant like wine or alcohol. Well, so what did we just now do there? We actually made, well, we didn't do it, it's been done, but we actually made an analogy. There was no text of the Quran to prohibit cannabis. There's no specific hadith that prohibits cannabis or cocaine. There's not an ijma of the jurist, oh, by the way, crack cocaine is haram. Okay, there probably is now, but there wasn't, whatever. So what did we do? Well, we did the fourth source of Islamic law. After the book, after the sunnah, hadith, after consensus ijma, we did qiyas, analogy. We said, well, look, what does cocaine or cannabis resemble? Well, outwardly, cannabis looks like a bark of a tree sometimes, or that doesn't get us anywhere. Nothing. Islam has no problem with barks of trees, okay, or whatever. Cannabis in some forms. But what cannabis does do, well, it's dark. In its raw form, it can be dark. Well, not everything dark is a problem. But it does have this quality of intoxication. Do we know anything else in Islam that intoxicates? And if we do, is there a ruling about it? Wine intoxicates. And wine is haram. Not because of its colour, not because of its name, because it intoxicates. So by analogy, by comparing one thing to another, as long as the comparison is done correctly, we will say wine intoxicates and it's haram, therefore cannabis intoxicates, therefore it takes on the same ruling, haram. And that process is called analogy. Okay? And I'll give you an example. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is just a really good example between Imam Shafi and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, just two great, Imams. Shafi and Imam Ahmad both agree that yes, Prophet ﷺ was once asked, Ya Rasulullah ﷺ, my mother died unexpectedly, can I build a well for her? And she's dead now, so can I build a well for her? And the rewards of people using that, when people use that well, and then the rewards that whatever I get for building that well, it will go directly to her, be transferred to her. He said yes. Actually, he didn't say it like that. Can I build a well for my mother as an act of charity which you'll benefit from? Yes. So he builds a well. And another person came, Ya Rasulullah, my father passed away. Can I perform Hajj on his behalf? Meaning, and he gets the reward? Yes. Another person said, Ya Rasulullah, someone has passed away. Can I do this? And he said yes. So they all agree. Dua, the living, if they make dua for the dead benefit. Even though the action of the dead has stopped. Prophet ﷺ, didn't he say? When a person dies, his deeds come to an end except for 3. Okay? A sadaqah jariyah, that he does a recurring act of charity. Like he himself builds a well, so even after his death, people use the well. Or he himself pays for the carpet in the mosque, then even after his death, people are still using the carpet in the mosque, let's say. So that's like a sadaqah jariyah, a charity that keeps continuing even after the person's death. Sadaqah jariyah, ilmun nafi', beneficial knowledge that he's spread. because even after the death, people are benefiting from the knowledge, and then they pass it on, and a righteous son or a righteous child who prays for him. So his deeds are dead, but we know, even though his deeds are stopped, the dua of the living can help the dua of the deceased. That's consensus, so clear in the Quran and the Sunnah. So yes, the deeds are stopped, but these aren't his deeds. These are our gifts to the dead. Gifts to the dead. Shafi agrees, Imam Ahmad agrees, no one disagrees with this. We also know that we can build a well for someone, because the Prophet said we can do that. We also know we can fast for someone, because the Prophet was asked that in Sahih Bukhari. We know that we can do Hajj. There's one or two conditions. You should have done Hajj yourself first, but it will benefit. Shafi says yes. Whatever the texts say, that's the benefit that can go to the dead. But Imam Ahmad and Abu Hanifa, and thereafter the majority of the early Muslim scholars of Salaf, the majority of the Tabi'een and the Tabi'un, they said, actually, look, when the Prophet is saying yes, 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 he's actually saying yes to anything that the living do to benefit the deceased. That's more or less the position of Abu Hanifa and the Hanafi school, and Imam Ahmad in Hanbal and the Hanbali school. Imam Ahmad, just as an example, has knowledge of 1 million hadiths. Okay? Dwarfing Bukhari, by the way. Okay? Doesn't he know that actually the Prophet, so for example, Imam Ahmad will say, reciting the Quran and sending on the rewards to the deceased, it falls under the same category. And that became the majority opinion. Imam Shafi says, no, we'll only stick to what the texts say. So we won't do the reciting of the Quran. Or I sit here and say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim durood, and then say, Ya Allah, give that to my grandfather who's passed away. Imam Ahmad will say, Bismillah. Abu Hanif will say, Bismillah, go ahead. Imam Shafi will say, no, we'll just stick to the text on this case. Why did Imam Abu Hanif and Imam Ahmad, and Imam Ahmad's very strict at following the Salaf, by the way. Imam Ahmad got his hair cut, right, for like 3 dinars, okay, or 3 dirhams or whatever, because there is a hadith of the Prophet did it. So he goes to the barber, he says, look, I'm from the people of hadith, and our way is to act upon every hadith that we collect at least once. And there's hadith that I haven't acted on. Barber goes, oh, Bismillah, I'll get the reward, and he shaves his head for, 3 pence. Okay? And yet, Imam Ahmad adds. Why does he add? He knows there's nothing in the Quran that says, if you recite the Quran and pass it on to the dead, it will benefit. He knows there's nothing in the hadith or the sunnah that says the same thing. But what he has is, the Prophet ﷺ said, if the living does X, the dead will benefit. So Imam Ahmad looks back and says, well, by analogy, by qiyas, if we do these things, it will also benefit. Abu Hanifa likewise and the majority of the Salaf. So here now, Imam Shafi's position is, it's a bid'ah to recite the Quran and send it on to the dead. Imam Shafi's position, let's say. Imam Ahmad's position, Abu Hanifa's position, and the majority of the scholars is, it's actually beneficial. But why? Because Imam Shafi says, it has no basis in the Sharia, because he put a limit around the acts. Imam Ahmad says it has a basis because we've just done a qiyas, an extension. And that is why you'll get differences like, for example, even though this is not my view, but I'll tell you the last one. Hadith in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet says, Ya Rasulullah, why fast on Mondays? Because the Prophet told us fast on Mondays and Thursdays are recommended days of fasting. In one particular nation, Sahih Muslim, he was asked about fasting on Mondays. He said, this is the day I was born, and on the day that revelation first came to me. Remember that hadith. Then there is another hadith about Yawmun Ashura. We fast on Ashura. Prophet comes to Medina. I'm making the story short because there's more detail to it. He comes, he says, oh, why are the Jews celebrating this day? This is the day, Ya Rasulullah, that the Israelites, Moses and the Israelites, were saved. Allah saved them from the tyranny of Pharaoh. So we commemorate the day of this great blessing. What was the blessing? Allah saved them and parted the seas for them and did all of that thing, thereafter. There is another hadith which has some weakness in it. It is the day that Noah got into the ark. And then there's a really fabricated hadith. It's the day that Adam's forgiveness after being expelled from paradise happened. But that's a very fabricated hadith. So, the majority of scholars after the 5th century, after the age of the Salaf, said, look, celebrating the Prophet ﷺ's birthday, Mawlid, Milad, providing there is nothing else in it that is haram, like free mixing or gambling or music, or it's not going to happen like that, but anything haram, then our basis is, he ﷺ told us that actually his day of birth, Monday, is something special, and he goes and highlights it. And then if they're fasting, if they're celebrating because Moses rescued the Israelites, Allah rescued the Israelites on that day, what greater blessing could there be than the day that Allah sent He ﷺ to the people of the earth? And you know what? No Muslim can deny that fact. He ﷺ coming onto this earth is the greatest ni'mah that Allah has given to the people of this earth. There is no denying that. The one who denies it is either because he's just ignorant or he's got a really warped understanding of who the Prophet is. But the scholars, after agreeing with that, they say that's fine. But one group of scholars, minority scholar, which is the opinion that I've just taught you, did the Sahaba and the Salaf practice it? No. Was there a need to practice it? Yes, because it's an expression of loving the Prophet ﷺ. They needed to express that as well. But they didn't express it. They could have expressed it. They knew Monday was the day he was born. They knew the Ashura hadith. They knew this hadith. But one group of scholars say, we don't find the action of the early Muslim imams on this, so we avoid it and keep away from it, which is what I've just taught you. The other scholars, which are the majority, say there is an asl in the Sharia. There is a basis in the Sharia. And a bid'ah is that which is la asl lahu fi Sharia. That which doesn't have a basis, not doesn't have a practice, doesn't have a basis, neither in the book nor the sunnah nor. So then you get major scholars like Suyuti, Ibn Hajar al-Haytami and others who practice and encourage the milad. Ibn Taymiyyah's view is simple. We don't do it because the practice wasn't done, even though he understands why it's done. It's done out of love, respect, reverence. Subhanallah, these are great things. He said people will get rewarded for their intention in celebrating the milad, but not for their act. Why? Because it's a bid'ah. But not that bid'ah that makes you a deviant Muslim, just a bid'ah that doesn't have a strong proof. Otherwise you get rewarded for your intention, but you should encourage people not to do it. Other scholars say, no, the act has a basis, you get rewarded for the act and your intention. Meaning it's just a difference of opinion. Wallahi, this issue is as important as whether I go down in ruku with my into sajda with my hands first or my knees first. No one would fight about this because there are bases to do both things. This is the same thing. Yes, of course, some people add certain things to it, but if we were to ban everything because someone has added something silly to it, we wouldn't even teach religious knowledge, because there are idiots today, there are devils today who speak about the religion and they don't have a religious teachers to connect them back to sound Sharia knowledge. They don't have isnad, a chain of transmission in their knowledge, and they themselves are idiots. And yet we have them abounding. Do we now say, let's no one read a book, learn religion? No, we say, learn but be careful. Don't go beyond your level. Same thing. If someone's going to practice the milad, say, don't love and remember and revere the Prophet once every year. Do it once every day. Do it 10 times every day. Don't make one day in the year. And don't do it and not come to the prayer. I'm going to sing some nice nasheeds about the Prophet Madhin Nabi Sallallahu, some praises, fantastic. But then I don't pray. Do you think that the Prophet will consider that praise? He'll consider that an insult. Especially when he said the difference between us and them is the prayer. Whoever abandons it has fallen into disbelief. So it's a matter of, khalas, I don't do it. And to this day, I have scholars and teachers who do it. I have friends who are so much more learned than I do, who do it. And every time the 12th of Rabiul Awwal, which is one of the dates that it is said the Prophet is born on, comes upon, off my teachers go, off many of my friends go, and they're serious students of knowledge, and they, mashallah, they have a commitment to the sunnah, not like me. I don't have much of a commitment to the sunnah. A group of us who stay, and a group go. Khalas. And we come back as if nothing's happened. Khalas. Why? Because difference of opinion. Because they have a different understanding of bid'ah, according to the Sunni scholars, And I have a more cautious one according to someone like Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. But both are legitimate. Therefore, when I teach this, I'm saying to you, it's a good opinion that I've taught you at the beginning, but it's not the last word. Maybe some of you already know, maybe in the future some of you will learn that actually we like the opinion of Imam Suyuti and Imam Al-Ghazali and Imam whoever, and we'll follow that, Bismillah. But at the moment, if you don't know any better, anything that the Prophet, some of the companions and the early Imams avoided as regards to a religious practice or a religious belief, avoid. Because it's very possible to be a bid'ah. But don't criticize, condemn those who do something different than what you're doing. And because we haven't adhered to this rule, we have got ourselves into all sorts of difficulties. There are Muslim brothers now who are graduating from Islamic universities who will tell you using the tasbih bead is a bid'ah. Ajib. There is a consensus about its permissibility. They just disagree. Is using the hands better or is using the tasbih bead? But its permissibility, it's agreed upon.
Can't even do dua after this.
They say you can't do dua. And what is it? I follow that opinion where we keep away from doing dua, preferably. Okay, I follow that opinion. But can't do dua? What's it based upon? The Prophet ﷺ, why don't I do it? Well, we follow that cautious practice. We didn't see the Prophet ﷺ, the companions, after every fard prayer, lift his hands to the for the congregation and do dua. Okay, fine. But it has a basis for doing the why. There were some times that the Prophet ﷺ did dua in congregation. Okay? Dua is always good. Okay, dua is always good. So after the prayer, when everyone is there, why not now and again make a dua for them? Now and again leave it, and now and again do it, so that we don't do something too regular. This, even if I don't follow that opinion myself and I disagree with it, is a religiously legitimate opinion. And I'll tell you what, if any one of us went back in a time machine to 50 years, anywhere in the world, or 80 years, including Makkah, Medina, you would have found that that would have been the normative practice of making dua. Now you get brothers who not only don't make dua, the Imam doesn't make dua, they don't even make dua. And there are, you know what, I must have had at least 50, 60 brothers over the last 10 years come to me and say, you know what, since we learned that opinion not to make dua, we end up not making dua at all.
Yeah, that's what I'm fear is, because people don't make dua at all. They just go away.
Just go. And this is sort of adab, because the sunnah at least is to sit down a little bit and make some dhikr. So because you know what, and it's a bad analogy, but actually when the winds bring in the rain, it takes about a second or two for the rain to come on you. I know we're talking about Allah's barakah, but that's actually the adab. That's why the Prophet would recommend we just sit there for a little bit in the same spot, so that the barakah can come. But what is the point here? You'll get some brothers really uppity about it. Whoa! Abu Aliyah saying you can make dua after the prayer. Oh, this man's deviant. And believe you me, this has been said on more than one occasion.
You can Google it.
You can Google it, yeah. And this is a real disaster. This is the thing that is dividing the ummah. Go back to classical scholars. We are now being taught that there has only been one or two rightly guided scholars in the ummah. The majority have become deviant. And here I am, can't even recite Surah Fatiha properly. Lalu panju in my alif bata. But somehow I'm questioning the great imams. Well, Abu Hanifa didn't know much. Really? Well, agreed. If you say he's ignorant, then what category does that make me in? Really, what category? And you know what? End of the day, when the heart and when the tongue, because the heart is from the heart, when the tongue is ready to curse or to criticize the awliya of Allah, then be sure there is no nur in the heart. There is no nur in the heart. Man aada, the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah said, Man aada li waliyan faqad adhantahu bil harb. Whoever shows enmity to a wali of mine, I will be at war with him. You think Allah will cast nur in a heart of his enemy? Wallahi, no. And Imam Shafi says, if the ulama are not the awliya of Allah, Allah has no awliya. And when I say ulama, I mean ulama amilun, khashi'un, the rightly guided, God-fearing scholars. Because what can happen, and sometimes it happens, but it doesn't happen with the majority of scholars, but it happens. When you become a scholar, you can make a career out of it. And you'll find every century you'll have tens of scholars criticizing their colleagues that, you know what, where's your fear of God? You're just doing it to get into money from government, or to get a reputation, or to get a big house, or to get a... So it can happen, because scholars are human beings. But the majority of scholars, inshallah, we hope that they are God-fearing. But now and again. So leaving that, I'm talking about the God-fearing scholars. If Abu Hanifa and the likes of him aren't God-fearing, subhanallah. But today, subhanallah. And there are strange things that happen. So, please be tolerant on each other. Islam is vast. The word kullu can have different shades of meaning. The Prophet, Umar radiallahu anhu says, when he sees the congregation of Taraweeh, what a wonderful bid'ah this is. Imam Shafi'i says, authentically related from him, bid'ah is two types. Bid'ah mahmuda wa bid'ah madhmoom. Bid'ah which is praiseworthy, and bid'ah which is blameworthy. And that saying of Shafi'i became the dominant teaching of orthodox Sunni, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah Islam. The majority of scholars took that position of Shafi'i literally and clearly, that there are two types of bid'ahs, good bid'ahs and bad bid'ahs. A good bid'ah would be something that the Prophet didn't do, but it's good, is that now we read, this isn't the Quran, but now we read the Quran with dots and dashes on it. This is the Quran, Kitabullah. At his Sallallahu time, there was no dots and dashes. There were no tashkilat, vowel points. We also have, now, we have the Quran broken up into 30 parts. And each 30 part, each juz broken up into quarters, rubs, okay, and broken up into tenths, because it helps finishing the Quran once every 3 days, once every 10 days, once every 2 weeks, once every month. But that wasn't at the time of the Prophet, but we still have it. Those are what some people will call good bid'ahs. Bad bid'ahs, for example, in some of the Muslim Arab lands, even now, when you get a funeral procession walking by, you get someone with a microphone and he says, such and such has died, so please make dua for him. And they do that all the way to the graveyard. Now, that's a bad bid'ah, because the Prophet told us when someone dies, we have to do two things. Hurry to the graveyard and be soberly quiet. I mean, you might be reciting a few things quietly, but not chanting it out really loud. And you're going slow in the procession because you want as many people to hear the microphone message as possible. So it goes against the sunnah in two ways. As an example of a bad bid'ah. A bad bid'ah is someone who is teaching religious knowledge. I'm not talking about teaching his children. I'm talking about sitting on the pulpit, on the Jummah khutbah, and actually he has no religious teachers in a continuous chain back to the Prophet ﷺ. And you have all of these, not all, a number of significant Islamic channels on TV, okay, where people are giving fatwas, some of who used to be some of my students, and I know that they know 1,000th less than I know. They might be more pious than me and God-fearing, but their knowledge is 1,000th of mine. And I don't even believe that I'm capable of giving fatwas. I'm like a person who works in a shoe shop. If you come to me and ask me, Abu Aliyah, I want a pair of size 9 shoes, brown, with small heels, I'll look and I'll say, oh, Bismillah. It's done. But if you come to me and you say, I want size 9.5, and I want them greeny yellow with high heels, I'll probably look at you funny, but I will say to you, I can't do it. You need to go to a cobbler, someone who makes specific shoes. The muftis, the great muftis of the past, they are the cobblers. They can make the rules of Islam. Me, once they make the rules, inshallah, or in some areas, I can take the rule and I can give it to you. And in some areas, I can't even do that. I'm a bit like a trainee pharmacist. If you ask me about what shall I have for a common cold, for a headache, I've learned that. So I get the medicine off the shelf and whatever. But if you want to know something deeper, you have to go to a doctor. Really, and if we just do that, subhanAllah, I don't know this, so I won't practice this. I know this now, but I won't condemn you.
But if you can't find a doctor, then you go to a quack.
That's what is happening.
Yes, but that's true. You're very true. But you can't go to a doctor. You end up going to a charlatan, a quack, okay, which is now happening. Understand this. One of the great ways, I knew a brother, mashallah, I guided him so much after this affair. And he came from a family of about 7 or 8, and he was the youngest or the second youngest. And his mum and dad, for whatever reason, didn't even give him a second look. He wasn't the brightest. He wasn't bringing the money. So in his family system, he was like just, bacha, come here. But then he was the first of his family to become religious and pray 5 times a day. And once he started becoming 5 times a day, and they started calling him, Sufi Saab and Maulana and whatever, he realized he was getting the respect that he's never heard. It's very intoxicating. And after a little while, I noticed that he's saying things about Islam well out of his league. One time it happened, 2 times it happened, so then I pulled him aside. I said, brother, the sheikh was sitting with us. The sister asked a question. Why did you open your mouth? You're the youngest amongst us. The sheikh is sitting there. Why did you feel you had to answer? Then, he starts weeping, and then he tells me this is a thing that he's noticed on himself. And he said, mashallah, that's a good thing that you notice on yourself. Just beware that religious knowledge can be intoxicating. But it's a dangerous thing. Okay? So just all the teaching is here. Really, there are mosques. If I say to you, the month before Ramadan is called Sha'ban. On the 15th night of Sha'ban, there are many hadiths, but at least 4 or 5 authentic hadith that tells you Allah is more forgiving on that night than other nights. Hadith in Tirmidhi and Abu Dawud. And the likes of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, who's quite a strict person against bid'ah, says it is encouraged to do extra ibadah on that night. If you go to some mosques and say, one of the 2 well-known opinions on this issue is that Laylatul Nisf min Sha'ban, the night of Sha'ban, is a special night for ibadah. So I encourage you, but there is a small amount of scholars who say there are no authentic hadith, all the hadiths are weak, but the majority of our hadith scholars say there are some authentic hadiths, therefore they say do ibadah. If you say that in some mosques, they won't allow you back in to speak. What? So if Ibn Taymiyyah was here, if Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali was there, if Imam Nawawi was here, if the vast majority of scholars were here, you say, bro, sorry, we can't have you speaking because you're a bit dodgy. Tell me, what is more bid'ah than that? And yet today, that's exactly what will happen. Most of these things that happen on the internet chat rooms, in the masjids, in the Islamic universities, in between people, all of it is ignorance. No one amongst them has hardly studied anything. And those who have studied, some of them are so, subhanAllah, they shouldn't have studied because they don't have this to study. And I know some of them, unfortunately. So inshallah ta'ala, with that being said, that's really the rough thing on bid'ah. It is so complicated that actually you'll have no agreement on its definition, but you have a vast majority of scholars who will extend the definition of bid'ah to include good bid'ahs, and a minority who says will be safer and be a bit more stricter. Both are fine. Stick to one. Stick to rightly guided scholars, but don't criticize your Muslim brother or sister. You may advise them or discuss with them. And in that way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless us in some way. Otherwise, as a rule of thumb, I will try to keep away from every bid'ah that is truly a bid'ah, because it's all misguidance. And Allah knows best.
We'll do question answer next week, inshallah. We'll continue with the same theme and question answer.
I don't think we can